Continuation of The Wind in the Willows. Chapter 6. From One Prison to Another. It was spring, and Mole and Rat were looking forward to getting their boat into the water for the summer. They spent their days painting and varnishing, mending paddles, repairing cushions, and doing all the little jobs necessary for getting a boat ready. One morning, as they were fishing their breakfast and making plans for the day's jobs, they received a surprise visit. It was Mr. Badger. "The hour has come," he announced. "What hour?" asked Rat, puzzled, as he looked at the clock on his mantelpiece. "Why, Toad's hour, of course. I said I would take him in hand as soon as winter was over, and I'm going to do it today." Badger sat down in an armchair and told his friends, "I learned just this morning that a powerful new motor car is being delivered to Toad Hall today. I'm certain that at this very moment Toad is dressing himself in his ridiculous driving clothes. We must hurry and rescue him before it's too late." "Right you are," cried Rat and Mole. With Badger leading the way and Rat and Mole following behind in single file, the three animals set off on their mission of mercy. They didn't stop until they reached the driveway of Toad Hall, where a chauffeur was parking a shiny red motor car. The door to the house was suddenly flung open, and out swaggered Mr. Toad, dressed in an enormous overcoat, cap, and goggles. As he was drawing on his long driving gloves, he caught sight of his friends. "Hello there, my good fellows," he called out. "You're just in time to come with me for a jolly, but the serious looks on his friends' faces interrupted his invitation. Badger strode up the front steps and told his two friends, "Take him inside." As the struggling Toad was carried inside, Badger turned to the chauffeur. "I'm afraid Mr. Toad has changed his mind. Please take the car back." Then he joined the others inside the house and shut the door. "Now then, Toad, take off those ridiculous things," he ordered. "I will not," replied Toad angrily. "What is the meaning of this outrage?" "Then we'll take them off of you." Rat sat on Toad while Mole pulled off his driving clothes bit by bit. Once that was done, the terror of the highway was merely Toad again, giggling weakly as he stood up and looked from one friend to the other. "You knew this would happen sooner or later, Toad," Badger scolded. "You've ignored all our warnings. You've continued throwing all the money your father left you, and you've giving us animals a bad name by your furious driving, your smash-ups, and your battles with the police." Then, putting his arm around Toad's shoulder, Badger continued gently, "We all know you're a good person at heart, Toad, and I'm going to make one last attempt at reasoning with you. Come into the library and we'll talk in private." Once the library door had been closed behind Badger and Toad, Rat and Mole seated themselves in armchairs and waited. "This will never work," sighed Rat. "Talking will never cure Toad. I know him. He'll agree to anything, and then go out and do as he pleases." From the other side of the door came sounds of long, drawn-out speeches by Badger and heavy anguish sobbed by Toad. After an hour, the door opened and Badger led a limp, sobbing Toad out by the paw. "My friends," he said to Rat and Mole, "I'm pleased to tell you that Toad has seen his mistakes. He's truly sorry for his actions and has given me his solemn promise to give up motor cars forever." "That's very good news," said Rat, with some doubt in his voice. "If only—" But a twinkle in Toad's eye made him stop. Badger didn't notice this as he went on. "There's only one more thing. Toad is going to repeat his promise in front of you both." There was a long pause as everyone waited for Toad's promise. But what they heard was, "No, I'm not sorry for what I did. It was a wonderful, glorious experience, and I'll do it again the first chance I get." "I told you so," muttered Rat. Badger rose to his feet. "Since you have gone back on your promise, Toad, I'm convinced the words have no effect on you. We'll just have to use force instead. You can't force me to do anything." "My dear friend," said Badger, smiling slyly, "you have often invited the three of us to come and stay with you at Toad Hall. Well, now we're accepting that invitation. We'll stay here until you come to your senses." Then he turned to Rat and Mole and said, "Take him upstairs and lock him in his bedroom. Then we'll make our arrangements." Although Toad kicked and struggled, Rat spoke kindly to him on the way up. "It's for your own good, Toady. Think of all the fun we'll have together once you're over this craziness of yours." And Mole added, "We'll take care of everything for you and see that your money isn't wasted. Just think. There'll be no more incidents with the police and no more weeks in the hospital." When the bedroom door was locked and the three animals had gathered again downstairs, Badger warned them, "We must be on our guard at all times. Toad must never be left alone for an instant. He's so determined to follow this craziness of his, there's no telling what he might do. We'll take turns sleeping in Toad's room at night and divide up the day into shifts." At first Toad was very difficult to handle. He would pretend his bedroom chairs were motor cars and drive them wildly around the room. Then depression would take over him, and he would lie in bed almost lifeless, even though his friends tried to interest him in other things. One morning when Rat came on duty to relieve Badger outside Toad's door, Badger told him, "Toad's still in bed, and when Toad's quiet like this, he's up to no good. He can be a sly and convincing actor. Be on your guard." Rat approached Toad's bedside and cheerfully asked, "How are you today, old chap? It's a fine morning to jump up and go out. And boating season is beginning too." "Dear kind Rat," murmured Toad weakly, "if only you understood how serious my condition is. How I'll probably never be able to jump up or go boating again. Don't worry about me. I never wanted to be a burden to my friends. In fact, I probably won't be for much more." "Well, if that means you're going to come to your senses, I'll do anything to help, whether it's a burden or not." "Thank you, dear Ratty," gasped Toad weakly. "In that case, I must beg you to hurry to the village and bring back the doctor, before it's too late." "No, I can't ask that of you. That would be too much trouble. Forget that I asked." "Look here, old man," said Rat, beginning to get alarmed. "Of course I'll go get the doctor, but surely you're not that sick. Let's talk about something else." "Talk won't help me now," whispered Toad sadly. "And while you're in town, please ask my lawyer to come too. I fear it's time for me to get my affairs in order before I... "Oh dear, a lawyer? He must really be bad. I've known him to act a little sick before, but he's never asked for a lawyer. I'd better be on the safe side and do what he asks." And Rat hurried from the room, still remembering to lock the door behind him. As soon as the key was turned in the lock, Toad hopped out of bed and watched from the window as Rat hurried down the driveway. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed in his best suit, filled his pockets with all the money he had in his dresser drawer. He pulled the sheets off his bed and knotted them together to make a long rope, which he tied to a pole at the window. Then he slid down to the ground, smiling at his cleverness. He began whistling a happy tune as he marched off in the opposite direction from the one Rat had taken. When Badger and Mole returned to Toad Hall, the embarrassed Rat had to face them with the news of Toad's disappearance. "You of all animals, Ratty," scolded Badger. "You who warned everyone else about Toad, you were taken by him." "He was so convincing this time." Badger sighed. "The worst part is, now that Toad's gotten away with this, he'll think he's so clever that he'll try to get away with anything and everything. We'd better stay here for a while longer. He may be brought back sooner than we think, on a stretcher or between two policemen." Meanwhile, Toad was happily skipping along a high road many miles from Toad Hall. He had taken hidden paths and crossed several fields. often changing directions just to throw off anybody who might be following him. What a smart piece of work on my part, he told himself. Brains came out the winner against brute force. Poor old Ratty. He's a good fellow, though not too smart. Perhaps one day I can teach him a thing or two. With these conceited thoughts filling his head, Toad entered a town. The sight of the Red Lion in front of an inn reminded him that he hadn't eaten anything yet that day. So in he marched and ordered the finest luncheon served in the dining room. Toad was halfway through his meal when a familiar motor car sound of pop-pop from out in the street made him drop his fork and tremble with pleasure. The pop-pop got louder, and then stopped right outside the inn. Moments later, two men entered the dining room, talking happily about the wonderful motor car that had brought them there. Toad listened for a while, and then couldn't bear it any longer. He paid his bill and hurried out of the inn. There can't be any harm in just looking at it, he told himself, as he slowly walked around the car, inspecting it, admiring it, and touching it lovingly. I wonder if it starts easily. And the next moment Toad was turning the handle and listening joyfully to the familiar pop-pop sound. And then, as if in a trance, Toad found himself in the driver's seat, pulling the lever and swinging the car round the yard, out through the archway and onto the road. In his trance, he had no idea of the right or wrong, or even what might happen to him. As he speeded up and headed for the open country, Toad was still in his trance. He knew only that he was Toad the Terror, Toad the Lord of the Trail, who had the power to make everyone else get out of the way or be smashed into nothingness. Toad came out of that trance only when he found himself standing in a courtroom and hearing a judge speaking. You have been found guilty on 3 counts: stealing a valuable motor car, driving recklessly, and fighting with the local police who tried to arrest you, because there are 3 crimes, not just one. I will impose the stiffest sentence possible: 1 year for the theft, 3 years for reckless driving, and 15 years for what you did to the police officer. That adds up to 19 years, but I'll round it off to an even 20. Take him away. So, shrieking and praying and protesting, Toad was dragged off in chains from the courthouse across the town square to a grim old castle, whose courtyard was filled with armed guards and snarling dogs. The police sergeant turned him over to a toothless old jailer, with the warning, Watch out for that vile Toad. He's sly and crafty, and will try to fool you the first chance he gets. Guard him well, or you'll pay with your own head. The old jailer led the helpless Toad down into a dark dungeon, where the prisoner flung himself on the cold stone floor, sobbing in despair. Toad, you're now in the deepest dungeon in the best guarded castle in all of England, snarled the jailer. No one has ever escaped from here, and no one ever will. Then the great door clanged shut, and the rusty key turned in the lock. This is the end, sobbed Toad. Rich, handsome, popular Toad, who has been imprisoned unjustly. Everyone who once knew him will forget all about me. Wise badger, intelligent rat, sensible mole, what will become of me? Me, unfortunate, unhappy, forsaken Toad. Chapter 7. A Hare-Brained Escape. In the days and weeks that followed, Toad repeated his cries with no one listening. He refused all his meals and paid no attention to the old jailer's offers to bring in anything the rich Toad might want from the outside, for a price. The jailer had a daughter, a pleasant, good-hearted girl, who was very fond of animals, and even kept a bird, a squirrel, and some mice as pets. Since she often helped her father with some of his easy duties, she knew how miserable Toad was. One day she said to her father, I can't bear to see that poor beast so unhappy and getting so thin. Let me try to take care of him. I'm so used to animals that I probably can get him to eat. The old jailer agreed. since he was annoyed with Toad's sulking and fancy airs. That very day the girl knocked at the door to Toad's cell and went in. "Cheer up and be sensible, Toad," she said. "You must eat, and I've brought you some of my own dinner. It's beef and cabbage, fresh from the oven." Even though Toad refused to touch a bite and remained stretched out on the dungeon floor, wailing and kicking his legs until the girl had gone, the wonderful smell of the freshly cooked food stayed in his nostrils and soon reached his brain. And his brain began to work, thinking new thoughts of his old life, his old friends, and his own great cleverness. He suddenly came alive. "Why, I can do anything if I set my mind to it, even escape from here. Yes, I must plan for that." Hours later the girl returned, this time with a tray of steaming tea and hot buttered toast. This food reminded Toad of the wonderful meals he had been served at Toad Hall, and this time he sat up, munching the toast, sipping the tea, and talking about his house, his friends, and of course his own importance. The girl saw that Toad's spirits were lifted when he talked about himself, and she encouraged him to go on. And he did, giving her details about Toad Hall and the descriptions of all his animal friends. By the time she left the cell that evening, Toad had returned to his former self, even singing a song before he curled up on his straw and fell into a dreamy sleep. In the days that followed, the girl and Toad had many interesting talks. The girl grew very sorry for Toad, for he was a poor little animal who had been locked up in the prison for a very minor offense. Then one morning the girl came in with an announcement. "Toad, I have an aunt who is a washerwoman." "That's nothing to have to be ashamed of," answered Toad. "I have several aunts who should be washerwomen." "Do be quiet, Toad. You talk too much. Just listen to me for a minute. This aunt does washing for all the prisoners in this jail. She takes it out Monday morning and brings it back Friday evening. It occurred to me that since you're very rich and she's very poor, you could help each other, if she were approached in the right way." Toad didn't understand what the girl was getting at, but he argued, "Go on, my dear." "My plan is for you to arrange to have her dress and bonnet, and you could escape from the jail in them. You two have figures that are very much alike." "I beg your pardon," said Toad in a huff. "I happen to have a very elegant figure, for a toad, that is." "So has my aunt. But have it your way, you horrible, proud, ungrateful animal. I'm just sorry I even tried to help you." "Thank you very much, anyway," said Toad. "But really, you can't expect Mr. Toad of Toad Hall to go about the countryside disguised as a washerwoman." "Then you can rot here dressed as Toad," shouted the girl. "You can hardly ride out of here in a coach with 4 horses." On some occasions Toad had been known to admit that he was wrong, and this was one of them. "You're a kind, clever girl, and I'm a proud, stupid Toad," he confessed. "Please introduce me to your deserving aunt. I'm sure we can come to a satisfactory agreement for both of us." The next evening, which was Friday, the girl brought her aunt into Toad's cell. The woman knew what was about to happen, and the sight of Toad's gold coins on the table left very little for them to talk about. In return for his money, Toad got a cotton print dress, an apron, a shawl, and a faded black bonnet. The woman asked only one favor. "Please tie me up and gag me, and leave me in a corner of the cell. This way I can claim that you attacked me, and I won't lose my job or get into trouble." Toad was delighted. "I'd be happy to do that for you, good woman." Then to himself he added, "I'm always doing myself a favor by holding my reputation as a desperate and dangerous fellow. How marvelous!" Once the washerwoman was tied up in a corner, the girl helped Toad out of his vest and jacket and into the dress and apron and shawl and bonnet. "You're the very picture of my aunt," giggled the girl. Toad frowned. He felt insulted, but he was wise enough not to say a word. The girl gently pushed him towards the cell door. "Goodbye, Toad, and good luck. You'll be passing the guards on the way out, and they'll probably tease you. They always tease my aunt since she's a widow woman, but just tease them back, and you'll have no trouble getting through." Toad's heart was beating rapidly as he set out on what he considered a harebrained adventure. But he soon found that the girl's advice worked perfectly. The little washerwoman in the print dress found every door open to her as she left the prison. Minutes later, he found himself breathing in the fresh air of the outside world. He was free. Dizzy with the success of the daring escape, Toad walked quickly towards the lights of the town. "I can't stay here too long," he told himself, "for people in town surely know the real washerwoman." Some red and green lights off the side of the town caught his attention. "Ah, what luck! There's a railroad station, the very thing I need at this moment." Once he reached the station, Toad checked the schedule posted on the wall. A train was due in half an hour, and would be heading in the direction of Toad Hall. More luck, he cried happily. He went up to the ticket window and told the clerk where he wanted to go. Then, as was his habit, he put his fingers to where his vest pocket would have been to reach for his money, but all his fingers touched were a cotton dress and apron, and there was no pockets and no money. "Good heavens," he thought, "I left my money and keys and watch, everything that's usually in my pocket, back in the jail when I changed clothes." But even in this situation, and with the other travelers getting impatient in line behind him, Toad tried to use his old airs of importance to persuade the clerk to give him a ticket. "Look here, old chap, it seems I've left my purse behind. Just give me the ticket, and I'll send the money tomorrow. I'm quite well known in these parts." The ticket clerk stared at him and at the faded bonnet, and then laughed. "Your game won't work on me, madam. There's no free rides given here. Now move aside, you're holding up the other passengers in line." Baffled and full of despair, Toad wandered down the platform along the train. Tears ran down his cheeks as he moaned. "How awful to be so close to safety, so close to home, and to be stopped because I don't have a few shillings to pay my fare. My escape will be discovered soon, and then the police will be after me again. What am I to do?" As he came alongside the engine, he saw a big burly man in uniform oiling the train. The man turned to the weeping woman in the printed dress and faded bonnet and asked, "What's the trouble, little mother?" "Oh, sir, I'm a poor washerwoman who lost her money. I must get home tonight as my children need me, and I don't know how I can." "Well, I tell you what I'll do," said the kind engineer. "You're a washerwoman, and I'm an engine driver who dirties lots of shirts. If you'll wash some for me when you get home and send them along to the station, I'll give you a ride on my engine. It's against company rules, but there's no one checking way out here in this part." Toad's misery quickly turned to joy, and he climbed up into the cab of the engine. He promised himself that once he was back home, he'd send the engineer enough money to pay any washerwoman to do his shirts. Soon the train was moving out of the station, and Toad was so overjoyed at the thought of speeding closer to Toad Hall, to his friends, to his money, and his soft bed, and to the praises he'd receive for his clever escape, that he began to sing and dance all around the cab. The engineer looked on in amazement. "I've seen some strange washerwomen before," he mumbled, "but never one like this." Several miles later the engineer climbed onto the coals and looked back behind the train. "We're the last train running tonight," he told Toad, "but I could swear I heard another train following us. Yes, I see it now. It's speeding along, seems to be chasing us." Toad had stopped his dancing and was now crouching in the coals, desperate to do something, but not knowing what. "They're gaining on us fast. called the engineer, and the engine is filled with policemen waving sticks and swords and revolvers and shouting, 'Stop!' Toad fell to his knees and pleaded, 'Save me, dear kind Mr. Engineer. I'll confess to everything. I'm not a washerwoman. I'm a Toad, the well-known Mr. Toad of Toad Hall. I've just escaped, through my own cleverness, of course, from a terrible dungeon, where I was unjustly imprisoned. If those fellows on that engine capture me again, it will mean the end for me.' 'What were you imprisoned for?' 'Nothing really much. I borrowed a motor car. I didn't mean to steal it, but judges just don't understand that. You've been a naughty Toad, and I really ought to let the police have you, but you seem to be so distressed. I'm so soft-hearted when I see an animal in tears that I will help you. Now cheer up, and we'll beat them yet.' The two piled more coals into the furnace, and the engine leapt forward. Still the police were gaining on them. 'They have a better engine that can catch us,' said the engineer. 'There's only one thing left to try. It's your only chance, so listen carefully. Up ahead is a long tunnel. On the other side of the tunnel, thick woods line the sides of the tracks. I'll put on all the speed I can while we go through the tunnel. They'll probably slow down, since they're not familiar with it. When we're out on the other side of the tunnel, I'll put on the brakes real fast. The moment we stop, jump out and hide in the woods before they come through the tunnel and see you. And then I'll go full speed again and let them chase me as long as they like, as far as they like.' Toad nodded eagerly and followed the engineer's orders, and when he heard the call, 'Now jump,' Toad did. He rolled down a short embankment, picked himself up unhurt, and scrambled into the woods to hide. From behind a tree he saw his train pick up speed and the other engine come roaring out of the tunnel. When both had passed, Toad began to laugh, and laugh hard. The first time he had done so since he had been thrown into prison. But his laughter didn't last long when he realized that it was quite dark and quite cold, and he had no money, nothing to eat, and no place to spend the night. Even the woods seemed unfriendly, with owls laughing at him and foxes passing him with sarcastic remarks about his washerwoman clothes. Finally, after hours of wandering, the cold, hungry, tired Toad found a hollow tree. He made himself a bed with leaves and branches, and soon fell soundly asleep till the next morning. And we will continue this story next Wednesday. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.